Okay, so um, we are going to talk about now how a lot of the questions that we got were about how the students um, can best support the people in their lives that they care about who are living with severe mental illness in general and bipolar disorder specifically. So we got a lot of sort of repeating questions on that, but really they kind of fall into a couple of categories. So I'm not going to necessarily read any except one of these
Mhm.
verbatim, but I think a good place to start is kind of a general advice about what you would tell someone who lives with a family member that has bipolar
Mhm.
disorder, and what kind of like words of wisdom you have for them.
Sure. Um, Wisdom might be giving me too much credit, but um, as I kind of touched on earlier, I think first and foremost the don'ts, right? Let's start with the don'ts, and the don'ts are easy. The don'ts are don't ignore it, uh, don't downplay it, don't invalidate it, don't assume that what works for you works for them. Um, and by that I mean like a lot of people tell me, oh, just have you tried running? Have you tried that? It's like, well, I have physical conditions that prevent me from running, so that's not a helpful suggestion for me. Um, is exercise good for your dopamine levels and all that? Sure, somebody said that once. I'm not really convinced, but um, don't. I think the biggest thing is just don't invalidate, and I say that word a lot, and maybe I should clarify what I mean by that. As somebody said, but not the clinical dull version, but the mic version. Invalidating someone makes it feel like whatever they're going through is inconsequential, whether or not just to you or just in general or whatever. When you invalidate somebody, whether it's their mental illness, whether it's their sexuality, whether it's their gender identity, whether it's their uh, anything, that was a human being. There's no worse feeling in the world than having somebody that you care about or that you thought cared about you all of a sudden make you think that you're invalid, that you don't matter, that you are crazy for thinking the thoughts that you're thinking. So don't do any of that. Stay away from all that, and stay away from. Well, have you tried just thinking happy thoughts? All right, goofy. No, it's not helpful. That's not fucking helpful, especially when literally your brain. Think of your brain like a computer because it is. And it runs on electricity, just like a computer. And if you have bad software on your computer that is telling it to do things that it shouldn't be doing, the computer doesn't know any better. It's a piece of hardware. It's just going to do what your software is telling it to do. Somebody with a mental illness has corrupt software, period. And the software is telling them one thing, and it changes. I think it's also important to remember perspective. For you physicists out there, your perspective is your reality, period. Period. There's no buts, there's no comma, there's no semicolon. Your perspective is your reality, period. So if you perceive the world a certain way, if you perceive you a certain way, then that is reality for you. And nobody else has any right on this earth to tell you that you're wrong. Um, Having said that, feeding into their insecurities, feeding into their self-esteem issues, feeding into all these negative thoughts in their head is even worse, obviously. So don't validate that part of it, but do validate their right to feel that way, their um, current state of feeling that way. Say, look, I hear you. I get that you're going through this. What can I do to help? Hey, do you want to grab some ice cream later? Do you want to just sit and talk? Do you want to watch your favorite movie? Do you want to, whatever it is you enjoy? Do you want me to just sit here while you cry? Do you want me to, whatever it is, just be there. That's all you can do. At the end of the day, that's all you can do is be there. Um, Now, some of these get a little more specific and a little deeper, and we'll get into that. But that's sort of my overarching advice is don't invalidate, validate, and just be there. Like just whatever you can do. Even if it's the smallest gesture in the world, you have no idea can make or break somebody when they're in their dark spots.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. Um, just having a text that says, "Hey, I was thinking about you," changes your day sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. Um, And even people that don't have mental illness, I think, can agree with that. I think anybody can agree with that. Like just having somebody out of the blue text you and be like, "Hey, I was thinking about you. You know, how you doing?" Da, da, da. It feels good. It makes you feel good. You know, and when you're sitting in a state of mind where you're, you know, everyone hates me and I'm a piece of shit and I'll never be good at anything and I'm worthless and all the other wonderful thoughts that, you know, intrusive thoughts. There's that term again. Um, Getting that random weird text at 10 o'clock at night that's just like, "Hey, going to bed," popped into my head, checking in on you, miss you, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that can make or break somebody. So
Yeah, I think that's helpful advice. I I also I also want to say, like, you know, I've been a social worker for a lot of years, and mainly with children in the foster care system. And if there's anything that I've learned, it's two things. One, you should never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, ever lie about anything.
mm,
Even if it's hard, you should always tell the truth. There are ways to tell the truth that are gentle,
mhm,
you know, and you know, that are soft, but you're going to throw people who are already vulnerable into a hell of a tailspin if you
mhm.
lie to them.
Well, they're going to start doubting everything. They're already doubting everything. They're doubting their own self-worth, and now you're going to throw even more doubt on
Absolutely.
top of that. Then yeah,
Yes,
not
absolutely.
not
So,
you know,
so that never lie.
gasoline doesn't put out fires, guys.
That, and also don't overpromise.
Yeah,
So, you know, if there's something
it's
that
actually a
you
really good point.
can do, absolutely go ahead and say, like, I'm willing to do this, I can do this, I'm able
Mhm.
to do this.
Yeah,
Pair
that's
it
a good
with your
point.
honesty so that you're clear about
Yeah.
what exactly that is. But don't overpromise something that you
Mhm.
cannot actually do just because you want to
Mhm.
say something that is going to make the person feel better. So,
Well, and that brings up another really good point that probably fit in one of the earlier videos. But my one of my coping mechanisms was if I have a project to work on, i.e., somebody else, then I can ignore what's going on with me and I can devote all my energy into being there for people. And I was the guy that was always there for you and always had your back and rides at midnight, money, and gas, and food, and whatever the fuck you needed. I was there. I was that guy. I was the guy everybody counted on to give them whatever they needed. Meanwhile, I was ignoring all of my own problems. I wasn't dealing with any of it. It was just building up and festering inside. And I was pouring all of my spoons into all these other people and leaving zero for myself and literally spinning out of control because I had nothing left to give myself. So it's also important to remember that you cannot take care of anyone in any way, shape, or form if you are not first and foremost taking care of yourself, period. You can't because you won't have anything left to give. You just won't.
yeah, yes,
Um, so unless you're doing okay, unless you're on solid ground, and unless you got what you need, and whatever, however you want to phrase that, you know, yes, obviously, you know, you can worry about your friends, you can try to be there for your friends or your family members or whatever, but pouring all of your time and energy and effort into somebody else when you're drowning, you know, look at oh, I lost it. The stupid Rose, Jack and Rose on the stupid door. You know, "I'll never let you go, Jack," shove. That's basically uh what it is. That might be a really old reference for you guys, but whatever. Um
yeah, they'll figure it out. They're
they'll
fine.
figure it out. They'll Google it. It'll be fine. They got the Google now. Yeah, we didn't have to Google when we were kids. You know, I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't have, you know, this thing at my fingertips so I could be like, "Hey, I'm feeling this way. What does it mean?" Like that didn't exist when I was growing up. So anyway, that's off topic. But yeah, so take care of yourself first. Uh, and like I said at the end of my letter, don't ever, ever, under any circumstances, and this goes for every, not just mental illness, with everything, don't ever assume you know what's going on inside somebody else's head because you don't. You don't know what they've been through. You don't know what their life looked like. You don't know the trauma, the torture, the pain, the suffering, and you know the joy, the happy times, and whatever. You just don't. You don't know. You are incapable. You do not have the VHS copy, another old reference, of somebody else's life on hand that you can sit there and fast forward through and look at, you know, what they've been through. And even if you could, you're still not that person and you wouldn't react to those situations the same way they would. So, you know, that's
Yeah,
also important to remember. Just because something to you is like trivial and you're like, wait, that's not that big a deal, it could be earth shattering for somebody who's literally just run out of spoons. You know, the littlest thing.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm getting back on my soapbox, but um,
All right.
well, no, because I've been through it my whole fucking life of people like, well, it's not that big a deal. Not to you. Not to you. You don't know what's going on in my head right now, and you don't know what I'm going through. And that's a lot of what
major empathy fail, right?
yeah, well, and that's a lot of what my brother and I
Yeah.
go through is he, looks at like, dude, when my friend died last week, he was like, dude, people die all the time. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't respond very well to that, right? Because it was a major empathy fail on his part.
So yeah, so empathy. There we go. That's, I guess, bottom line. Have empathy. And if you can't have empathy, at least have sympathy. I mean, get one of the pathies out of there.
So I'm gonna post them a video. Do you remember seeing the Brene Brown video? It's basically bears in a well, and it's the yes, I know. It's like 3 minutes long about the difference between empathy and sympathy. Have you seen that?
No, I never saw that. Mm-mm.
Okay, so I'm gonna write myself a note.
Okay.
But they need to see that, and so do you.
Yeah.
So
We haven't even touched on the actual questions for this video. Should we do a two-parter for this one?
no,
Apparently,
we have. So the next one I think works really well with it. I changed the order, so it's a similar question, but it's about somebody who is not in a place to accept help. So the answer that you just gave was very much applicable to somebody who is willing on some level to accept support, accept help, accept care. And that I can feel safe in saying, I think, is not always a place that you are in. And it's certainly not always a place that everybody is in. So,
and I spent 20 years not there. So yeah, no, yeah. 100%.
Yeah, totally. So when someone is not willing to accept support, accept care, or whatever, is finding that difficult, what can you do? What should you do?
I mean, again, it becomes a factor of persistence, and it's either, and it's especially hard with family members, because family members, there's this ingrained thought that you have to be there for your family. Well, at least I hope that's an ingrained thought. But like I said, I have one friend. I mean, I have acquaintances. I have thousands of acquaintances. And it's hard. There isn't always something you can do. And a lot of times the person you're going to try to help, sometimes shitty as it may sound, you have to wait for them to ask for help. And I don't even mean like specifically verbally, actually, literally ask for help. I just mean you have to be ready or waiting or willing to wait for them to open that door. If they've locked it from the other side, you're not getting through it with a fucking blitzkrieg. You're just not. So it becomes a waiting game. And if you don't have the energy, time, patience, or ability to wait that game, don't put yourself down for that. That's not really your failure. That's not your fault. And remember that. This kind of gets us back to what I was talking about, taking care of yourself first. Is while you're trying to help somebody who's already beating themselves up, you're not going to do you or them any good by starting to beat yourself up over your supposed failures and your inability to help them. Does that make sense? So that doesn't do anybody any good. That's not really a good answer. But I think it is the answer, right? Like I in my experience, because there wasn't a goddamn thing you were going to say or do to or for me that was going to mean a thing for many years in my life. And it didn't matter how many times I heard all these kind words of whatever from whoever, as soon as somebody said it, the automatic intrusive thought was, oh, they're lying. It's bullshit. You're a piece of shit. They're just saying that because they're trying to make themselves feel better. So, whatever. Yeah. So sometimes that just is what it is. I mean, bottom line, it just is what it is. So you have to either wait it out or try a different tactic, I guess would be my other advice. If what you're trying isn't working, try something else. I mean, if you are intent on making this happen and making this work, but also understand that if you push too hard, you're only going to end up pushing that person even further away. So thin ice, yeah,
Well, I think so. My personal experience with you on this one is kind of one of approach and retreat. Is like, if I come to you with some support and you're not in a place for it, you're not going to receive it. You just aren't. And that's my cue to not take that personally, which is
Right.
not always my strength, right?
No, it's
Is
not.
to is to not take that personally, to go away and let it be, because it's not about me. And then to that's the retreat part. And then to come back later and
Right.
try again, right?
Well, and that's
So I think not
important.
taking it personally is pretty important here.
You hit the nail on the head with the not take it personally. That's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is people can't look, guys and gals, and envies. You cannot take this stuff personally. It's not you, it's them, literally. Um, and I don't say that to be derisive or derogatory or blasé, but um, those are all $3 words. Powerful Scrabble words. There's that defense mechanism again. Yeah, I don't say that to be dismissive, but literally, it's not you. It's just not. And to take that personally is, again, not only doing yourself a disservice, but in the long run, then, because now you're going to start building a resentment of like, oh, they treat me this way because they're this, they're that towards me, and it's like, yeah, but it's got nothing to do with you. So now you're building up this sort of fantasy resentment towards them when
Yeah.
all they're doing is having World War IV in their head.
You're turning it into an interpersonal conflict when actually what it is a mental health issue.
Right, exactly. And I would say that goes under the don't list that I was talking about earlier. Don't do that. And also, remember to be kind to yourself. I can't stress that enough. You are not going to be able to be there for anybody until you are there for yourself, period. You're just not. And I know I've said it a few times now, but it bears repeating. You're just not. You're just not. So, yeah.
So we received a couple of more specific questions that I think boil down to, what do you do when you see a manic episode? What do you do when you see a depressive episode? And sort of like asterisk to that, what do you do when you see somebody getting mad? What is your advice on those?
Well, I mean, it's so case specific, but in general.
Well, we're talking about you, honey.
Well, no, I get that. This is my experience, but again, I mean, some of these are asking me about very specific family members in very specific situations. And like I said, I still want to talk about that person that asked about their dad, but
we will. But that's coming next. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you do when you start to see a loved one or a family member have one of these episodes? Again, like we've been saying, is one, be there for them. Let them know that you're there for them. Let them know that you're there to listen if they need to talk. Try offering, and I'm not saying this is going to work, because again, you get those weird walls around you when this stuff starts happening. Try the route of, hey, if you want to, go do X, Y, or Z, just to kind of get out of the house or get out of your head, or, that's a good phrase that I use a lot. Is like, hey, if you just want to get out of your head, let me know. Because not only do we confine ourselves into our rooms or our houses or whatever's when we're in these states, but we do get trapped in our heads, quite literally, while we're in these states. And so not only getting out of your room or out of your house, but the figurative, is getting out of your head, literally. Figurative, literally. Good one, Mike. So I think that's part of it, is just giving the person other options than sitting in the stew pot simmering on the same temperature for however long it's going to be. But again, it's important to remember that when people are in these states, they're not thinking clearly. They're not thinking in their best judgment. They're not on their best behavior. They are going to want to, especially in a manic episode, they're going to want to make some really poor choices, and you have to either stand by and watch them do it or try to get involved, and that could sometimes not end so well, not only in physical or verbal confrontation, but a lot of hurt feelings, and a lot of things get said, and a lot of things that aren't meant get said. And Lark has seen me do this to her, where I'll say something and literally 2 days later be like, I didn't mean that, right? Like, And it's, I don't mean to joke about it because it's serious, but um, yeah, it's again, it gets back into the 5-point phrasing of delusional manic episode where you get these things going in your head and you start, lashing out at people, when really the person that you're lashing out at is yourself. It's just easier to yell at somebody else. Um, that was a pretty deep expression. That was good. Yeah, so I don't know. It just boils down to just being there and reading the situation, read the room, right? And in theater, we always say read the room. Um, know what your audience is looking for, know what your audience is going to respond to, know what, especially if you're doing improv, which is what this is, bottom line. Um, that yes and there's a good expression for you guys to know. Yes and
Yes,
it comes from
do you want to explain that a little bit, because I feel like people don't necessarily understand it very well.
Anybody in your class that has any theater training will understand it, but yes and is an improv term, and what it basically means is when you're in a scene with somebody doing improv, you always want to yes and. It's the only cardinal rule of improv. Improv has no rules except yes and what that basically means is if Lark and I are doing some scene together and Lark opens the scene with, "Hey honey, I brought groceries home," and I respond with, "Who are you? This is my house. What are you doing here?" The scene is now dead. You've just completely broken the scene because I gave her a no but, right? I completely shut down what she had said and said, "Well, no, we're not doing that scene. We're doing this scene that I had already preconceived in my head." Preconceived notions, look them up. So yes and is, Lark walks in and says, "Honey, I brought groceries home," and I say, "Oh, that's awesome. Did you remember the zucchini I asked for?" So not only did I yes what she said, but I added on to it by adding the bit about the zucchini. Yes and, right? Preconceived notions, that's important. Get those out of your head.
Okay.
Yeah, I cut out there. That was weird.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, preconceived notions. Another $3 term that we need to get rid of. Anything you think don't. Just don't. It is so hard to unlearn something. It is so hard to unlearn something. So all of the media bullshit and all of the societal bullshit that you've heard, and I'm sorry, Lark, a lot of the textbook bullshit that you've read is bullshit.
That's why we're doing this.
It's literal bullshit, and it's old white guys sitting in lab coats in dank white rooms for the last 200 years writing about shit that they don't even understand. So yeah, so all your preconceived notions, get those out the window.
I want to add to that too, is we're recording this for Psych 1, right? This is a general psych class.
Sure.
And probably we're going to be using it also for what amounts to be the most basic social work class.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like sometimes people are like, well, I read the book, I've watched the lectures, I've, so engaged with the materials, and now I get it. Yeah. And, I have to say, again, like I said before, I've been a social worker a long time. Mm-hmm. And I don't get it, right? Because the thing is that you can't get everybody. Every case is different. Every case is different. You can't have the same lived experience as another person. No. So the task is not to get it. The task is to listen. Mm-hmm. The task is to do your best to kind of put yourself in a place where you can relate, mm-hmm. and be of some use. It's not to know. That's not useful.
And I think that actually is a better way to answer the overarching question that we're asking here than the sort of rambling answer I gave. Is, what can I do for my friend or family member? Listen, just listen, and then yes and. So 2 parts: listen and then yes mm-hmm. and. And I think, I used to teach improv if anybody wants a free lesson. But yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of improv. I did improv for years. I did it all throughout the Bay Area. And the greatest thing you'll ever learn is just to love. The greatest thing I learned through improv is, that was another old reference nobody's going to catch.
I didn't catch it.
Moulin Rouge. Okay. Yeah, the greatest lesson I learned through improv is the ability to listen, and is the ability, for as much as I talk, is to shut the fuck up and actually listen. Because you have to in improv, and you have to in these situations, in these mental health sort of crises, if you will, and even soon to be crises, or impending crises, listen, just listen and respond, and yes, and don't invalidate, and do what you can, but don't do too much that you're stretching yourself too thin. And um, you know, I will tell you, like, again, and I can't stress this enough, for somebody like me that was constantly, you're a piece of shit, you're a piece of shit, you're worthless, you're worthless, you're worthless. Having somebody sit there and be like, oh, but you're not, it's not helpful. It's just not. Like, it wasn't helpful to hear. It wasn't in any way effective. It wasn't, yes, the person wasn't invalidating me. So they weren't saying like, oh, well, that's just a dumb thought. Like, that's not what was happening, but it was just as useless. So it's not that I have a better answer than doing that. It's just that I know that's not the answer. And I think that does come into the listening, and yeah, sometimes the person isn't going to hear it, and I didn't want to hear it for years. But like my little last section of that letter, the reason I threw that shit out there was not to be like, look at all the cool, I'm so cool, I did all this shit, but to point out like that was the kind of stuff people would have to remind me of, and be like, dude, do you not remember this cool ass shit you just did like last week? Like, wasn't that cool? And it's like, yeah, but whatever, it was pointless, and that's, but it was still that constant sort of, I guess, repetition exercises, another acting term, where just having the repetition exercises of somebody sitting there being like, reminding me. My friend John for years has always been the one to do this, like, yeah, but remember this, remember that, remember this. And it's important, it is important to remember that stuff in those times, in those dark times.
I have an addition. So this is where having a policy of honesty is helpful, because you can't always punch a hole through the hamster wheel stuff. Yeah. If you're saying, well, no, you're not, everything's fine, you're good, but you can sometimes punch a hole through it by saying what you think and what you feel. So like, sure. If you have established a relationship where it's honest, and you have demonstrated that under all circumstances you are honest, and then you interact with this person who is in need, and you say the thing that is honest for you, and like, I feel this about you, this is what I see in you, this is how I feel about you, then sometimes that works, right? Because they trust that you're being honest.
Sure. And I think it's important that the expression I feel is a very useful expression, because it's not accusatory and it's not derogatory. It's so, instead of saying you make me feel, or you do this, which is a lot of times when we argue, especially in significant other situations, it's a lot of you make me feel, and you did that. No, just drop the you make. I feel, this is how I feel right now, and this is useful for just any kind of interpersonal relationship, not with mental health stuff. It's literally just communicating your feelings, your actual true feelings, without making it about the other person, without making it, you did this to me, or this is whatever. No, get rid of all that. It's not helpful. Just focus on the like, look, I understand that you're feeling this way right now, and I understand that this is what's going on in your head, and I hear you, and I'm sorry that this is the thought that you're having, this is the intrusive thought that's going on in your mind right now. I really am sorry that you're hearing that, but I just want you to know that I feel that you've always been there for me, or you always make me smile, or whatever the case is. But yeah, I think that's really important, is the I feel statements. I think those are super important. Absolutely.
Okay, so this one is the last part of this section, and I am going to read it verbatim. It is a little bit of a mouthful, so we're going to see if we can pull it apart a little bit.
Is this the one I wanted, or is?
Yes.
Okay.
So the student wrote, my father has been diagnosed with bipolar my whole life, and unintentionally it has affected my life and our relationship. We have a hard time connecting because, from his words, my emotions scare him. I have always believed that he just did not care about me, but recently came to understand that it is not me he's scared of, it's the emotions I show that scare him, because his emotions scare him. Okay,
there's a lot
can we pull this apart?
There's a lot to pick apart there. Okay,
it's a lot.
So first of all, whoever, I'm giving another Mike's 5 for 5 to this person for writing this question. So whoever you are, tell Lark, hey, Mike said I get 5 points. And
That's
don't
just
lie.
sweet.
Again, we're talking about being honest. Don't lie. Don't write Lark and be like, I'm one of the people Mike said to give. Don't. That's fucked up. All right. So this person gets another Mike's 5 for 5. Okay. There's a lot here, and this is why I wanted to talk about this question. Where do I even want to start with this? Okay. First of all, I love that this person intentionally put unintentionally in that sentence, because it means that they recognize that it wasn't their father being intentionally harmful or intentionally obtuse or whatever. They're acknowledging that this was unintentional behavior on their father's part because of their mental health disorder. So that's, that was worth a point all by itself right there. So good, kudos for that. I like that you acknowledge that. We are having a hard time connecting. Another good thing. Again, we're talking about emotions, we're talking about feelings, we're talking about being honest. That was a very honest statement. I mean, really, we're having a hard time connecting. Because as he says, I'll reword that so it makes a little more sense in my brain. As he says, my emotions, the students' emotions, scare their fathers. 100%.
I think
So
that's right. Yeah.
I can identify with that on many levels, and it's true. And for me, because it's the Mike show, for me, my emotions terrify me, and Lark knows this. Lark and I have had this conversation many times, especially anger. Anger terrifies me. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. I don't like me when I'm angry. So me being angry is bad for everyone, and I will isolate if I start feeling agitated because it ends poorly. So I absolutely identify with the idea of emotions scaring you. This is slightly different though, because she doesn't, or they don't say. I don't know why I'm just assuming this is a female, but they don't say that the dad's emotions scare him. They say that the student's emotions scare him.
Right.
Which is different, which is slightly different, right? And that's also that's worth, again, another point by itself, is important to look at, because it's, we accept the love we think we deserve, right? Great movie line, look it up. We accept the love we think we deserve. And so if 90% of what I say is movie quotes, sorry everybody. So if we accept the love we think we deserve, which I believe is a true statement, then obviously somebody having this affection or love or care or endearment towards you, especially as their father, although I don't know, never had one, I don't know, but I can only assume that would be terrifying, especially if you don't think you deserve it, especially if you don't think you're worthy of it, which is what I'm assuming is going through this father's mind. So I can totally understand that, and I totally get where this person is coming from. And then it gets, oof, and this is where my heart bleeds. I've always believed that he just does not care about me. Wait, I mean, that's rough, but they go on to say, but I've recently understood, and this is good for you, kudos, that it's not actually me that he's scared of, which is good. It's good that you realize that, and it's good that you are sort of able to separate, like we talked about earlier, separating your own reactions and your own sort of stuff, to put it, succinctly, to separate that from what's actually going on with your dad. And it's really good that you're acknowledging that, and it's really good that you see that, and that you're able to deal with that, or not deal with it, but to acknowledge it, which is the first step. So again, I really wanted to talk about this particular question, although I don't really see a question in it.
There's no question. It's just more of
a but I really did want to touch on that because I thought it was raw, and it was honest, and it brings up a lot of things that I myself have dealt with on both sides of this emotional equation, both being afraid of my own and then being afraid of somebody else's, and then vice versa. So it's a really well thought out statement, and I think it's really important for everybody to sort of just take a moment to sit on, because of that idea of understanding that it's not about you, and we all want it to be about us. Everybody does. That's just a human thing. We want it to be about us. It's our world, our universe, our, I am the center of my own universe kind of thing. But it's not. And until we can get over that sort of intrinsic human ego that we all have, we're not going to be helpful to each other, and we're not going to be societally helpful to each other, and we're certainly not going to be emotionally supportive of each other if you think you're the center of the universe. So yeah, so I just thought that was beautiful. My heart went out to you, whoever you are. So yeah, that's that. I don't know if there's something else needs to be said on that one, Lark, or
I don't think so. I mean, it's like I said, it's more of a statement than a question.
right. Yeah, I just thought I thought it was an important statement for people to see, or at least hear.
Yeah, I think it was important to acknowledge, for sure.
Um, because again, I mean, I don't know what help I am or could be to you in this situation. I mean, you have my virtual hugs and support from afar, but I don't know. I think it's good. You're doing the right things. From what this reads to me, you're doing the right things. You're acknowledging the facts. You're separating your own insecurities and maybe sort of self-doubts from the facts of his illness. So you're checking all the boxes as far as my textbook goes. So kudos.
Yeah, and I have something to add to that too, which is that, like, you know, when you're not comfortable with your own emotions, you're gonna have a real hard time even acknowledging or seeing other people's emotions, much less
Absolutely.
engaging with them like you have to when you're a parent.
Oh,
So, the fact that your father is frightened of his own emotions, kind of by definition, he's going to be frightened of yours. So, there's not, that's not your fault. This is his illness, not yours.
and also just
And
imagine how hard it would be for a parent to admit this to their kid, really. I mean,
right, absolutely.
like,
So
to have that open
clearly,
communication is just amazing.
that whatever came to be that resulted in this, sentence that they wrote us, what was some sort of really deep conversation that was clearly really difficult for the father, right? So we should at least acknowledge that however difficult that was for him to do, he engaged. They had this conversation.
Right.
Something happened that they were able to come to this understanding. And that's a starting point. Like,
Yeah.
it's not an ending point, but it's a starting point.
Your foot's in the door at that point. Sometimes that's all it takes. And it's like we said earlier, sometimes it's a waiting game. Sometimes you just have to wait for the other person to be ready. And it sounds like hopefully, this person's father did get to a point where they are ready. And at that point, half the battle's won, really. And that was what it was for me. And we'll get into this in, I think, the following video, when we start talking about treatment and about the system and how broken it is. I keep saying, I'm sorry, folks. My personal experience has been negative as far as our system goes, and we'll get into that later. But my point is, yeah. So, yeah, they opened up. They had this conversation. Yeah, and once you're able to accept the help, it's kind of life changing. It was for me anyway. So hopefully that is this person's experience. I don't know. I kind of actually like to have updates on this one, honestly.
Right in. Send me a message.
No, seriously,
I'll send it.
No, yeah, you can give the student my email or go through you or whatever. But I would like updates on that one. That one touched me a lot, actually. I had a little verklempt there for a minute. Yeah.
So we are finished with this section. So I'm gonna stop here.